Alrighty, everyone. This is meteorologist Timmy Albertson here, for you guys, to give you a quick little update on what is going on with the tropics. We do have tropical storm Idalia right now out just outside of Cuba, making its way into the Gulf of Mexico later on. We also have Hurricane Franklin, which did intensify pretty nicely overnight and is now a Category 4 hurricane. So, for those of you who might be new to these little updates here, I just want to make sure everyone's brought up to speed on the classifications of tropical systems. I know this chart might look a little much here, but it's pretty easy to understand. And basically, when it comes to tropical systems, what we do is that when the system starts taking on tropical characteristics, and we expect that it's going to develop even further, it becomes tropical depression. And at that point, it gets a number. Idalia was tropical depression number 10 a couple of days ago. Once that system, the winds, it gets better organized a little bit, and once the winds reach 39 miles an hour, it is upgraded from a tropical depression to a tropical storm, and that's when it receives its name. So when Idalia got winds about 40 miles an hour, the tropical depression 10 was changed to tropical storm Idalia. It'll maintain that tropical storm intensity until it gets to 74-mile-an-hour winds, in which case it becomes a hurricane. Now, we have 5 categories of hurricane that we use on the Saffir-Simpson scale. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Category 1 is obviously the lowest category for a hurricane. Category 5 is the highest, but much like tornadoes, an EF5 tornado does not have an upper bound for its wind speeds, neither does a Category 5 hurricane. So as long as the winds are greater than or equal to 157 miles an hour, it is a Category 5 hurricane. So Category 4 hurricane is what Franklin is right now, 145-mile-an-hour winds. It may intensify even a little bit more, but this is what it looks like on the satellite imagery below me. That's an infrared satellite imagery. That is not a radar. This is just measuring the temperature of the cloud top, so we can see a well-defined kind of core with the system, very well-developed eye, and it is looking a lot better than it did this time yesterday, and even better than it did a couple of days ago. This was the little one that we were talking about that was getting beat up by the wind shear after it made its way off the island of Hispaniola, and now it is in a much more favorable environment. It is rounding a kind of a mid-level ridge right now off towards its east. That's kind of what's giving it that northerly direction, but it will begin to turn to the north and to the east later on tonight and going into the day tomorrow, possibly even intensifying a little bit more. The winds maybe upwards of about 155 miles an hour. For right now, the center appears as though it'll stay off to the northwest of Bermuda as we go into Tuesday night and into early Wednesday morning. However, tropical storm force winds will still probably be brushing up against Bermuda as we head into the day on Wednesday. So they do have a tropical storm warning that is in effect for them. Upper level trough will then kind of latch onto that system and really kind of speed it up and fling it off to the north and to the east, keeping it generally out in the open water. So that is Franklin. And yes, we do actually have a buoy that is nearby Franklin Center right now. And we'll take a look at that in just a quick moment. But while we're on the topic, let's go ahead and take a look at Tropical Storm Idalia, shall we? All right. Tropical Storm Idalia doesn't look quite as defined as Franklin does, but it is looking much better than it did this time yesterday. We do see kind of a little bit of a center. These storms are starting to go around. Pressure continuing to decrease. Maximum sustained winds right now estimated about 70 miles an hour, so just shy of hurricane status. But because it is likely going to keep on intensifying, it very well probably will reach Category 1 hurricane status by the next update. And then it'll kind of gradually intensify a little bit as we go through the next about 24 hours or so. As it moves into the Gulf of Mexico, the atmosphere is going to be a little bit more favorable for it to intensify. Right now, the Hurricane Center is expecting it will become a major hurricane, which is a Category 3 or higher as it approaches the Florida coastline there. We can see there are hurricane warnings that are in effect for parts of the Florida coastline. We'll take a look at those here in just a moment. So that is kind of a general overview. One thing to keep in mind here, folks, when we show these cones is that obviously, as we're going to see, the cone is really just kind of where the center is expected to be, not where necessarily the conditions are going to be. And again, I say that because oftentimes with our bigger hurricanes or whatnot, their hurricane force winds will extend pretty far out from the center sometimes, and sometimes kind of wider than that cone. And you'll see what I mean here as we flip on over to the radar imagery here. So let's start off with Hurricane Franklin right now, and you see We got that hurricane you saw in the satellite imagery. This is the wind field, at least kind of estimated more or less. And this kind of blue color here, this teal color, are tropical storm force winds 39 to 56 miles an hour. And then that green color there is tropical storm force winds 39, or excuse me, sorry, 56 miles an hour to 73 miles an hour. So those first two colors are just the tropical storm force wind fields. And then when we get into this orange color, that is the hurricane force winds. So again, we have 145-mile-an-hour winds with Franklin right now, but that's only located in a small portion right around the eye wall. And you can see the hurricane force winds more or less kind of extend a little bit far out here. Let's see if we go from the center at the last update to kind of the eastern edge here. Again, only about 30 miles is what the hurricane force winds extend from the center. So especially sometimes with these rapidly intensified systems, they are a little compact. And I'll spare you all the scientific explanation as to why, but when we see these rapidly intensifying systems, they are kind of compact with their wind field. So even though Franklin looks pretty big on the satellite imagery, the hurricane force winds only extend about 30 miles out from the center, and from edge to edge here, only about 60 miles or so across. So again, the whole thing does not have 145-mile-an-hour winds. It's just a small portion right there. And obviously right here is where it drops below 74 miles an hour. So you can imagine kind of a pretty tight wind gradient there with that system. So this is going to be the same thing when we're talking about Idalia coming up to land here, is that even though it might be a major hurricane, not everyone is going to be seeing the high winds that are going to be expected with that. If we zoom out a little bit, you can see what I mean about the tropical storm force winds and the conditions going beyond the cone. Again, the cone is just where the center is expected to be, within a degree of certainty, but obviously the effects can be felt way out. So let's take a look here at this buoy. This is right at the edge. This is pretty much seeing about, 40 mile an hour winds, gusting up to about 50 miles an hour. This is what it looks like there. Now, mind you, Franklin is moving away from this system, or Franklin is moving away from this buoy at this point, so the wind speed's probably going to drop down a little bit more, but we do know that it did have some pretty decent waves with it, and it's likely going to probably continue to see waves about 13 to 14 feet at this time, and then eventually that will begin to kind of drop down. But pretty cool. This is what it looks like all the way out in the ocean. There is another buoy that is going to be further up towards its north. This is what it looks like right now, but it won't be probably until we get our way into tomorrow morning that we start seeing the conditions kind of dropping over in that location. And then by tomorrow evening, we should have a really good shot from this buoy out here. So this is what it looks like right now, folks. Mostly clear skies. Winds about 20 miles an hour, gusting to about 25 miles an hour. But right now, it's looking like that's going to get maybe not a direct hit, but a pretty near direct hit. So we should be seeing hurricane force winds out from that tomorrow evening during our weather chat. So that'll certainly be interesting to look at. Let's talk about Idalia. Again, Idalia tropical storm right now, likely going to be a hurricane later on this evening. It is expected to, as mentioned, kind of gradually intensify. There's again kind of that cone there, but again, we're going to be expecting that the conditions are possibly going to, extend a bit outwards from the center. There are hurricane warnings that are in effect along portions of the Florida coastline. Right now, it's looking like Idalia is going to make landfall as a Category 3 hurricane sometime Wednesday morning, probably right around 8 a.m., give or take an hour or so. And again, as mentioned, it'll be doing so with winds about 115 miles an hour. That's what's expected right now. However, well, we could maybe see it intensify a little bit more than that. We'll just have to keep an eye on it. Otherwise, hurricane watches and warnings kind of extend a bit inland. It'll weaken, though, as it goes over land. Tropical systems do not like land, they require ocean. So as soon as they get over land, they start weakening 99.9% of the time. And it'll weaken down by the time it gets to Savannah, Georgia, with winds of about 65 miles an hour. It'll then reemerge out into the open waters, kind of going off the coast of the Carolinas there, but probably maybe weakening a little bit more as it does so. And then eventually just kind of moving into the open waters. And for right now, it looks like it'll generally stay out in the open waters. So kind of two things that we're going to be watching. Idalia, And of course, Franklin, even though Franklin's going to stay out in the open waters, it'll still be pretty interesting to see when it passes by that buoy. But of course, the big one, and as mentioned, this will undoubtedly be this week's storm of the century. It'll get hyped up. But as we talked about, 115-mile-an-hour winds expected at landfall, but as mentioned, that'll just be right around a small area. Most places just going to be seeing, obviously some stronger than normal winds, probably some places seeing gusts well up to hurricane intensity. But again, we're not expecting that it's going to be the entire area within that hurricane warning. Will be, and generally too, especially the highest winds tend to be right up on the coastline. So that's just kind of a quick update, folks, on what is going on in the tropics. Again, make sure you join in tonight for tonight's weather chat. We'll be doing that this evening, probably around 6 p.m. or so Central Time. That'll put us at about 7 o'clock over in Eastern Time. I'll answer any questions that you guys do have about this. And again, we'll take a look, obviously, at the latest updates with Idalia and Franklin. And who knows, you may even learn a couple of things too. So make sure you tune in tonight. It'll be on the YouTube page. And other than that, hope you all have a good rest of your afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much.